What's up, NBA fan? What's up, all sports fans? This your boy JB. Holla. Host of the Behind the Bench Podcast Network channel. Giving a shout out to the rest of the crew. I'm talking about Shad, Kelvin, Jermaine, KB Film Room, Big Dog Talk Sports. That's right, that's right. And for everyone who's tuning in, we thank you for supporting Behind the Bench, subscribing to the channel, helping the show becoming the best that it can be. And here we go. Roll 'em. Hey, when all else fails, you find scapegoats and you keep scapegoating them until you can't scapegoat them anymore. So, as we know, as we've heard, the Los Angeles Lakers, all-time story franchise, the reality is when you mortgage everything away and you do so in record time, you have nothing. That's the reality. And all the commentary that I've came across over the past 48 hours has been directing ill will towards the owner of this franchise and the general manager / president of this franchise, de facto president, that is. And it all stems from the fact that the Lakers were unable to acquire the coach that reports said indicated they were looking to bring on board to replace Darvin Ham, who was fired after only 2 years of coaching the team. So Dan Hurley of the UConn men's college basketball team, who he's led to back-to-back national championships, he turned down the offer. I'm not going to get into the salary or the money or, people saying he was lowballed and all this stuff. At the end of the day, I remember watching Byron Scott last month doing an interview on one of these sports shows, and he said the Lakers are in flux. But the problem is the root of the situation, the root of the dilemma is not being identified. So what happens is, if the plan that hatched in the summer 2018, when they brought this dude to the organization, everybody know who I'm talking about. I don't need to say his name. The direction of the franchise was severely altered. That pursued an all-time win-now scenario. Not just win now, but win right now. And it's created all this chaos, all this instability, all this volatility. No franchise can survive that. It don't matter if you won 50 championships in the past. You can't survive that. But what's funny is all these voices, and I'm not trying to call anybody out. I think some of this is the fact that the Lakers, over time, became a victim of their own success. And what I mean by a victim of their own success is when the organization was experiencing, you know, the downside of existence in the league, when they had those bad years in the 2010s, I think what happened was it led to a circumstance where it generated a great deal of impatience because the franchise and its fans, and I'm part of this, even though I disagree with this whole situation of the past 6 years, but I'm still part of Laker Nation. So I think what happened is when you bring this dude on board and you're making all these extreme moves, the trades, the waiving of players, to manipulate the salary cap to try to placate to this guy and capitulate and sign these veteran players who we want. Well, what I mean by victim of their own success is the history of the franchise became distorted and misrepresented to justify all of the extreme moves that they have made since July 1st, 2018. That's what I mean by a victim of your own success. To where we've been misled in our conclusion of why the franchise was great in the first place, what generated the greatness. You know, the team won its first championship in Los Angeles back in 1972. But they went 8 years before they won their next championship. And that's when, quote unquote, the Showtime era began. Magic Johnson helping lead the Lakers to their first championship of the 80s. And they went on to win 5 championships in that decade, becoming a dynasty in the process. Then later on, of course, Kobe Bryant and Shaquille O'Neal, the Lake Show, they won 3 straight championships. They three-peated, 2000, 2002. And then we generated another run led by Kobe Bean Bryant and acquiring Paul Gasol, and they went to 3 straight finals, went back-to-back. And if Andrew Bynum had not been hurt, I believe they could have three-peated. That's just me. But because of that success, and to convince the fans that we must go all in to reclaim, quote unquote, our place in the basketball world, the franchise was essentially mortgaged off over these past 6 years. Well, that's not what generated the success of the Lakers in the past. They didn't mortgage off anything. They invested in their team. The investment is what brought forth Showtime. The investment is what brought forth Kobe and Shaq. So remember, Kobe was 18 years old when he was brought to the Lakers as a rookie. They had to invest in his talent, let him mature, let him grow. And then when he came of age, 4 years later, that's when they racked off the three-peat, the first of 3 consecutive championships. See, it wasn't contingent on Shaq per se, even though Shaq was, the most dominant figure in basketball. It was contingent on a player that they invested 4 years in with Kobe Bryant that propelled the Lakers back to the top. See, a lot of stuff has been misrepresented. And to justify all these moves that is mainly pressured and sought after by these talking heads on these sports shows that's putting pressure on this front office to capitulate, and they're fueling the demise of the franchise, but will be critical of it at the same time when things don't go well or is according to plan. They're playing a great role in this. So we've been led to believe that the franchise have always pillared players from other organizations to generate their championship teams. But if you pull back and really study the franchise, you'll come to find two things. That the staple position of the franchise has always been at the center spot. George Mikan, Will Chamberlain, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Shaquille O'Neal, Andrew Bynum, Paul Gasol, right? Now, Paul Gasol was really a power forward and only played the center position after Andrew Bynum started suffering the knee injuries. Andrew Bynum was the youngest player ever drafted in the NBA history, and that's before they implemented the one and done rule, where a player had to at least complete 1 year of college before being eligible to declare entry into the NBA. Bynum was drafted by the Lakers, right? So the staple position, Mikan was an original Laker when the team started off in Minneapolis, was founded in Minneapolis. Okay, the Lakers did trade for Will Chamberlain, but that was a final piece to the puzzle after Jerry West and Elgin Baylor led the Lakers throughout the 60s and led them to multiple finals, only to fall short to the dynastic Boston Celtics. Okay. They traded for Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, but that was as a reboot to the franchise after their cornerstone players, Jerry West, Elgin Baylor, Will Chamberlain, all retired like in 1974. Abdul-Jabbar was not a situation where you mortgaged the franchise off to pursue anything. It was a reboot to the franchise. So it wasn't like they started winning right away after they got Kareem. It wasn't until they started drafting players by the late 70s, which was a precursor to Showtime. So the staple position of the franchise has always been center, which they have not been able to solidify ever since they traded Ivica Zubac to the Clippers. That was a major mistake. But they was forced to do it. They was coerced to do it. They was pushed to make that move, to satisfy a guy, to bring in a shooter who can space the floor. That's why that was one of the reasons why Zubac was traded to the Clippers. I will not get into the other reason in this video right here. Okay. So the staple position of the franchise has been destabilized because of an individual style of play that practically eliminates two positional players on the court, the center and the point guard. See, and when you're going to come to find out is the root of the problem is not the front office. The root of the problem is the style of play, the system that one player has to employ, where you have to scrap your roster of the past, of the recent past, to bring in players that cater to his style. But the style of play is no longer conducive to winning. And it never really was, which is why that one player, that guy, had to seek super teams to win. The conundrum is not the front office. The conundrum is that player and his style of play. But also, if you look at the history of the franchise, many of the cornerstone players that contributed to winning were drafted by the franchise. Elgin Baylor, Jerry West, Gail Goodrich, Tommy Hawkins, Norm Nixon, Michael Cooper, Kurt Rambis, James Worthy, Magic Johnson, A.C. Green, Byron Scott, original Laker. I just gave a string of names during Showtime. The majority of that team was drafted. Then at the end of the day, towards the end of the decade, as Showtime was, reaching its conclusion, had its run, as they prepared for a new era, they drafted Vlade Divac, who was the starting center. Well, I forgot about Divac. Vlade Divac was another center of the Lakers, who in his second year was the starting center for the Lakers, who advanced to the finals in 1991 versus the Chicago Bulls. Eldon Campbell drafted. David Rivers, who was the number one point guard in the country, coming out of Notre Dame in 1989, drafted. Then after Showtime officially ended, they started over through the draft. Eddie Jones, drafted, a 3-year player. Nick Van Exel, drafted. George Lynch, 4-year senior, coming off a national championship in North Carolina, drafted. Anthony Pillar, drafted. They acquired the draft rights to bring in Kobe Bryant, original Laker. Derek Fisher, drafted. See, the foundation was always predominantly drafted players. And then they added the necessary supporting players to pursue championships. Then, after the Lake Show had a run with Kobe and Shaq, when Shaq was traded to Miami, they started over through the draft. Andrew Bynum, drafted. Sasha Vujacic, drafted. Jordan Formore, drafted. And they built that bench up. Josh Powell, Luke Walton, drafted. You see, it's a misnomer. Today's sports commentary is misrepresenting the franchise and the history thereof. And that's what's causing a lot of confusion. And it's misleading a lot of fans of the franchise that became so over the past decade. So you create this volatile mix where you have fans that want to win by any means necessary, and then you have that guy's fan base that is volatile in terms of they always want to see moves made for that guy, and it's all this pressure that's being stemmed and placed on this front office, and they can't keep up. It's impossible to do. And the reality is they're being scapegoated. But before all this started, what I remember, the 2017 season and the 2018 season, the front office was receiving positive marks, positive evaluations. It was all positive. The front office drafted, or the organization drafted all their young talent, the original young core, the real young core. They was clearing out the cap space that had been kind of compromising their ability to really move forward. They had all their draft picks in line for the new decade. And they were set up in the perfect position to acquire that star player during the 2019 offseason, which featured the deepest, most talented free agent core in the history of this league. The problem is, the reality is, the franchise, because of pressure to win, instead of saying, my thinking was always, okay, we won all those championships in the past. Okay, so in that regard, we have nothing to prove. So let's start over. Let's build up right. Yes, it will take patience. It will take time. But my thinking is, well, in due time, we'll return back to prominence, but it's going to be in a revolutionary way where your predominant players would be one and done. The majority of their roster consisted of one and done players. So going in, they're coming in at 18, 19 years old. So we've seen over the past 4 years, all these young teams that are now ascending to the top of the ranks: Oklahoma City, Denver Nuggets, Minnesota Timberwolves, Dallas Mavericks, Sacramento Kings, New Orleans Pelicans, Houston Rockets have improved. San Antonio, we know they're going to improve. The Milwaukee Bucks, Boston Celtics, New York Knicks, Orlando Magic, Cleveland Cavaliers, right? Giannis came in the league at he entered the league at 18 years old. It took most of these players that we know as superstars, Giannis, Kawhi Leonard, Paul George. There are a string of star players of today that on average, it took them 4 years before they start averaging 20 points a game. It took Kawhi Leonard. Kawhi Leonard is a two-time Finals MVP, right? It took him 5 seasons before he started averaging 20 points a game. 5 seasons. Well, the Lakers had 2 players. Well, Julius Randle in his third, really was his 4th year, but he missed his whole rookie year after he broke his leg during his debut game in the NBA. His last year with the Lakers, once he was inserted into the starting lineup, he started averaging 20 and 10. So technically, in his 3rd full season, he started averaging 20 and 10. If Brandon Ingram would have been allowed to play his game in his 3rd year, remember his rookie year, he averaged 8 points a game. His 2nd year, he doubled that to 16 points a game. If he was allowed to really develop and mature and play his position, he would have averaged 22 points a game. That was the projection. But playing alongside that guy, he only averaged 18 points a game. So he missed a whole year of true development, but as soon as he gets to play his game, he averages 24. So technically, we had 2 players that was drafted by this franchise that was averaging 20 above by their 3rd year. So that's why I say, then you look at the Denver Nuggets, who just won the championship last year. Our young players, outside of Nikola Jokic, our young core was outperforming their young players. Like Jamal Murray, he didn't start averaging 20 points a game until about his 4th or 5th year in the league. Michael Porter has yet to average 20 points a game. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is, it's easy to scapegoat the front office. That's convenient. But the root of the problem in the grand scheme of things is impatience during the era. See, we went this course at the absolute worst time. Because you're starting all over again after a transcendent all-time great player in Kobe Bryant retired. So therefore, you knew we had to start over. And you can't accelerate the process from what it needs to be for you to be successful long term. And that's the reality. That is the flux. That's the crux of the situation, is that the franchise was led to take all-time shortcuts. And now, because of that, they are reeling because, for all practical purposes, they have been operating backwards for the past 6 years. You do not go from having the youngest team in the league into having the oldest team in the league in the span of 1 year. Normally, the natural course of a team is, okay, you have a run with a core roster, right? They always start off young because you're drafting players who coming out of college. Well, during that time, that was the way the system worked. Okay, so you're drafting young players, they mature. The years down the road, they hit their prime, and that's when you go for it. You at your peak. Then you have your run, then, okay, players start to age, out, and then eventually, you have to bring in maybe 10 years down the line, you have to start the process over again. Well, the Lakers went in reverse. They went from having the youngest team in the league to having the oldest team in the league. Well, what do you think is going to happen? See, it's not really the front office to blame. It's the manner of which they were led to pursue success. That's the problem. It's unrealistic. It's unfeasible. It's not even viable. That's the problem. Now, by them being the quote unquote front office, they're going to take the biggest hit and the biggest criticism. But when you got a player on your team that's causing all this flack and commotion, well, it's set up for him to get a pass. And that's what's going to happen when all this is over. Because if you really think about it, the players, like I said, I'm not going to go into the number of players they brought to this team. I'll do that down the road. But the fact is, they've made a boatload of trades that normally would exist over a 15-year period. They've done 15 years worth of trades in the span of 5 years. They brought in 2 superstars through trades over a 2-year period. And Anthony Davis and then Russell Westbrook. But they want to say, okay, Russell Westbrook is what really broke the bank and set the franchise back. No, it don't matter what 2 superstars you brought up in here. The fact of the matter is, blockbuster trades should happen like around every, if a team winds up doing that should be every probably 6 to 7 years. They made 2 blockbuster trades to bring in 2 franchise players in 2 seasons. So think about what you had to give up because you had no leverage because everybody know you in win now mode. All-time win now mode. So any team that you try to make a trade with, they're going to try to fleece you. And it may not look like it, but in all actuality, they won the trades because of what you had to give up to bring in the requested superstar was extreme to begin with. And all we got to show for it is that one season in 2020. But that wasn't as a byproduct of building. It was as a byproduct of mortgaging the franchise off. And that's one of the reasons why it's going to be hard to bring in an established head coach with credentials. Because for all practical purposes, we have nothing. I mean, compared to what we could have and what we should have, we should not be depleted of talent. We drafted 14 to 15 draftees over a 4-year period. Not to mention the G League players that we had, like Alex Caruso's, players like that, who made contributions to this team, who's now sorely missed. So pretty much the whole talent pool's been wiped out. What do you think is going to happen? You can't succeed without having talent of your own. And that's what I'm trying to say. It's impossible. And it's showing. They got 2 so-called top 10 players on this team right now, and they can't win 50 games. But we're seeing countless teams in the Western Conference with really only one superstar. They're winning 55, 56 games. On average. So what I'm saying is this, man. What I'm saying is this. Everybody got to look at the situation and say, the main issue has been impatience. Impatience led to their young core being extinguished. But the young core, it was the most important element in preparing and setting the foundation for this franchise to be successful in this decade. And if they would have done that and not bring that dude to the team, Not only would we be better off, but I believe in a lot of ways we would have exceeded expectations and surprised even ourselves. To where we would be saying, well, the owner, she got to sell the team or Rob got to go. But just a year ago, or close to a year ago during free agency, when they brought in all these moves, just as they did the year before, just as they did the year before, just as they did the year before, in 23, 22, and 21, he was being celebrated. Oh, man, Rob Pelinka for president. He's working his magic. He's doing wonders. Executive of the year. And these moves don't last because it's unfeasible to keep on bringing in. You can't rely on free agents every year to win. You have to have your own talent pool, because your own talent pool, you can draft them, you can build them up according to the system that you want to employ, to where they develop their chemistry, over time. And that type of team will always have the edge over a team that relies on outside players every year to try to succeed. That's the problem. They're doing everything that this guy wants them to do, but it's not working. So in all actuality, the root of the problem is not the front office. It's who they're trying to placate. And I guarantee if they were to move on from that guy, they can start making logical moves again. But the problem is fans got to pull back, man. We can't keep on playing on this notion that it's championship. Now, don't get me wrong. Now, if we would have did it right and built up that young core and been patient over a 4-year period, we would have saw the benefits of that. And they would have emerged, and we would have seen that they are the foundational source of pursuing that championship run. Then, when a situation calls for it, where we know that they're prime and ready to pursue that title, then we can draw those expectations and say, okay, man, we ready to rock now. It took 5 after they traded Shaq. After Shaq was traded to Miami in 2004, how long did it take before they won their next championship and built their way up to that point? It took 5 years. It didn't happen overnight. But once we got there, man, the journey, we look back on it and said, man, we back, baby. We back. But it didn't happen overnight. But there's no way in the world that we should expect a championship. When they say championship or bust, well, it's been more bust than championships. So if it's more bust than championships, that should let us know that this gig is up. It's been up. And the problem is, if everybody has to be realistic. And if we was more realistic, then we'll be less prone to criticize the front office every day. See, all this ties in. That's why I say, logic has to be applied and say, this thing is over, man. No one player should be dictating, especially a player who has no history with your franchise. No player should be dictating what your front office should be doing. And you're not getting the results. And you're not going to get the results. And if you have to pillar off more of your future, or more of your franchise, I should say, because the future's been, for this decade, been mortgaged off for that 1 year. But to continue to pillar off your organization by giving up more and more draft picks to try to skirt the system and try to bring in more stars to try to shortcut your way to win it is not going to work. Not even for the Los Angeles Lakers. No franchise can do that and survive. And that's the issue, man. And this front office is under so much pressure, man. They've lost their way. That's the problem. It's not innately that they're inept. No, it's because of unfair expectations that's forcing them to make these hasty moves. And because of that, they're finding it difficult to hire an established coach. because no coach want to come in and deal with that, because it's going to be the same pattern. It's going to be the same pattern, and more impatience going to brew. And the impatience is now stemming from the fact that in the back of our mind, we know that the franchise is being mortgaged off. So as they say, the time is ticking, and the hourglass, the sand, is increasingly falling to the bottom of it at a rapid rate. But the time been up, and that's the problem. And it just proves we should have stayed the course. 1 year ain't worth giving up no 10 years for. Because if you do it right and you believe in your franchise, and the fact that we won championships the way we did over a 30-year period, then we would have won again on our terms, and we would have achieved more on our terms than on somebody else's terms. And that's what's going on right now. So as long as they continue to try to travel down this road, they're going to get the same results. And it's going to be more frustrating. It's going to be more fingers being pointed at this front office. But the root of the problem is, in the grand scheme of things, it was impatience that led to all of this. And the past glory was used, misrepresented, distorted to rationalize what's going on right now, or try to justify all the moves that they've been making that is leading them to the point of no return. So it comes down to this. Do they put it into it and we realize that we're going to have some down years? That's the reality that I think a lot of people don't want to face. And I get it, man. But when you go this route, it's going to lead to that, no matter who you are. So do you want to take the down years coming up and don't go down this road no more, or continue digging deep into the rabbit hole and this franchise fall off the face of the map for the next 10 years? That is the reality of the situation. I know it's not popular to hear it, but when you look at everything and assess the situation, that is the reality of the situation. So I just want to drop that nugget, man. Like I said, I'd be glad when this is over. It's not worth it. And I think we all deep down know that it's not. It's not achieving the results. The Lakers never operated this way, is what I'm trying to say. It wasn't about championship or bust. It's about, once you establish a standard, then yes, you expect greatness, but it's a result of investing in your franchise to get those results. They didn't take shortcuts to generate Showtime and generate that dynasty of the 80s. They didn't take away to produce the dynamic, or as Shaq called it, the best big man, little man combo in league history. They invested in that. Pau Gasol was the final piece of the puzzle, but the team was already ahead of the curve before they got Pau Gasol. You see, they invested. They didn't take away. That's what's going on right now. Like I said, it's over. The gig is up, man. And like I said, this is not about trying to direct anger towards anyone. It's about the situation as a whole. And like I said, when you get rid of talent like we got rid of, that's almost like a once in a lifetime opportunity to get 14 drafted players naturally like that. 14 over a 4-year period. That is an amazing achievement by that scouting department. That's an amazing achievement. We was ahead of the curve. All we had to do was see it through and be patient. And those young men would have came through because they wanted to play for the franchise. They wanted to represent the franchise. They wanted to help lead the franchise back to prominence. And that's why I still consider them Lakers to this very day. So I just want to drop that nugget. And until next time, this is JB for BTB Behind the Bench.